Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters: Costa, Lance, Otto, RDM, John C., and Helen. Shout out to the Lake Forest Breakfast Group, Broad Stop and Captain Mike's in Kenosha, the Greentown Tavern, and the Frolic Lounge in Waukegan.
Hot mic, everybody.
All right, hot mic. There you go. And watch out, he does post things that are on hot mic that you don't expect.
All's fair in a podcast, right?
You got it. There's no rules. I got no rules. It's podcast. Well, how you doing?
Oh, we'll see.
Is it raining where you are, Keith?
It is just starting, and it's sounding horrific outside. The lightning and thunder.
Yeah.
It got real dark real fast.
Yeah, we just lost power and then came back on, fortunately. So at least for the moment, we're looking good.
Well, my laptop is fully charged, so while I might be doing it in the dark, I have committed fully to the podcast.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's fun. We've been having a good time with it. And people, at least in Lake Forest, do view this. I can't tell you. I've had a number of times. The other day I was walking down the street. A couple walking the other day said, "Oh, aren't you on the podcast?"
Absolutely, he is. Yeah.
Yeah, I get stopped on the street about it. It's that good.
Well, look, this is just another medium and an opportunity for people to discuss really local issues with people they know locally, who they don't run into, and it sort of clears a little bit of the dumpster fire that's social media these days.
Yes.
And so look, people are always looking for reliable sources of information from people who they know. Yeah. Why not?
Yeah. We are the media now. I mean, we've talked about this. Yeah. It used to be Lake Forest had two newspapers, two weekly newspapers. I mean, you got stuff all the time. They would cover the city council meetings. They'd cover the Lake Bluff issues. Mm-hmm. There's none. I mean, all it is just, as you say, the dumpster fire that is social media. So true. we are the media now. There are some people who don't like that, by the way. We've been blocked by several people.
Well, and that's a shame.
Oh, wait. Hold on, we got power.
Yep. Oh boy.
Yeah, this may be a little rough here today, Pete, at least for the next whatever.
We good. This is part of live TV. Here, hold on.
We just don't know what will happen. We're in an age where people don't want to hear certain information, and I've always had a problem with that.
Yeah.
Look, as a lawyer, it's the unknown that is painful, whether it's good facts or bad facts. If you know the facts, you can work with them. It's what you don't know that can be really trouble. And by not sharing information, we're just risking sitting in our own corners talking to ourselves.
Yeah, which is what people are obviously. A lot of politics today is exactly that.
Yeah,
I mean, I see stuff on, particularly, and you said, I'm sure, on social media and within Republican groups. Republicans, we used to like openness. We used to like knowing what is happening. We used to like responsible journalism.
Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Good morning. Sorry, I have no power here, so let me.
Oh, you are. Yeah, you are powerless. Yeah. Now you're
I
back.
am powerless. Just like being a moderate Republican.
Yes, exactly. Very.
Close the door here.
Oh, good line.
Keith Brin, welcome to the Lake Forest Podcast, my friend.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Frederick Lesser, how do we know Keith Brin?
Keith Brin was the clerk of our circus court in Lake County. For
Circus or circuit?
Oh, circuit. I'm sorry, circuit. Yeah, right. Keith was the clerk of the court. I've known him for many, many years now. He's been a great guy, and he is now had the misfortune or fortune, I'm not sure which, of becoming the Lake County Republican chairman. Now, the way, most people don't know, people know the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, but they don't really know how these entities are actually organized and how they actually function. Actually, what it is each precinct from the granular level, each local precinct selects a committeeman, and that committeeman casts the number. It goes to a meeting after the primary, casts the number of their party's votes that were cast in the last primary in order to elect then a county chairman. And the county chairman then goes on and elects the statewide chairman. All of them, there's all weighted votes in that you cast the number of votes that you had for your party in the last primary. Am I skipping over the township people, or I don't think the township
What
people...
did he just say, Keith? Can you?
Here's with one very minor correction. So essentially during every primary, every 2 years, every precinct can elect a Republican and a Democrat on their respective primary ballots, precinct committeemen. It's an elective office, you have to run for it, but it's only up in the primary. Once those are elected, a certain amount of time after the primary is over, each party in that 2-year cycle has to have its county convention, where all the elected precinct committeemen come together. And Rick is correct, they each get to vote for chairman, whoever is running. You have to be an elected precinct committeeman to run.
I had to be correct someday.
Yeah, there you go. And they get to vote the number of votes they got in their precinct that elected them precinct committeemen. Then the person who gets the most number of weighted votes is the chairman. Now, as to the state part, every congressional district in Illinois has the same thing, a Republican and a Democrat precinct committeeman. For the Republicans, we elect ours at that same county convention. For the Democrats, oftentimes they're actually on the ballot, on the primary ballot, and directed and elected directly. Either way, then, those representatives are the board of the Illinois party, and they then elect their chairman.
I wouldn't know that because I haven't taken a Democratic ballot in some years.
Correct. So right now in Lake County, we've got 4 congressional districts feeding into us. So we actually have 4 Illinois state central committeemen that feed into Lake County.
And as a former Illinois Republican Party employee, I can tell you it's a nightmare trying to count the voting for those state central committee elections. It's just absolutely insane. I think, years ago, there was a group wanting to go to direct elections on the Republican side of it, and it was kind of a fringe group. They'll probably get mad when they hear me call them fringe, but from a practical standpoint, it becomes kind of a crazy situation. So I can see where maybe they'd want to go to it, but there's some value in the precinct committeeman system. Now, they don't have that in Cook County. In Cook County, they don't elect precinct committeemen. It's the only county in the state. I've always wondered what would happen if they did. It'd be kind of an interesting scenario to see that.
Are they appointed?
But they're appointed by the township. So in Cook County, they elect township committeemen. They don't call them chairmen. They call them committeemen. Mm-hmm. They elect those in the 30 suburban townships of Cook County. In the city of Chicago, in the 50 wards, they elect a ward committeeman in each one. And then they are free to appoint precinct captains, but that's, an appointment thing. And there's very few. My dad was a Republican precinct captain years ago in Niles Township when I was growing up. And it was a big deal back then and stuff. You'd be hard pressed to find with a few notable exceptions of a couple townships that still have some robust organizations in Cook County. You'd be hard pressed to find precinct captains in Cook County. So that's why I've always wondered what would happen if they were to put that on the ballot. And that same system applies to the Democrats too. They do the same thing. They elect township committeemen in the suburban townships and a ward committeeman in the city wards, city of Chicago wards.
But in Lake County, however, we elect on the precinct level, and the precinct committeemen then elect above that.
Mm-hmm. And we have a township chairman in each township. And while Lake Forest is mostly in Shields Township, it's actually in, I believe, 5 townships. Shields,
it's also Moraine, Deerfield,
West Deerfield,
West Deerfield, and Vernon,
and Libertyville, the area by Lake Forest Academy. It's like one precinct where all the people complain about the trains. That is Libertyville Township. So Prue Beidler did win Libertyville Township in the Lake Forest mayoral election. We'll give her that.
Way to go, Prue.
There we go. Now we're back on. The storm has relented for a moment.
Just for everyone's background, we record the show on Wednesdays, and there's a horrible storm hitting the area here, and I'm without power, and apparently Pete is without power. But Keith, we talked a little bit about the local elections and stuff. And again, thank you for coming on. And I just, I want to say, both you and Don Tracy, who's the Illinois Republican Party chairman, you guys deserve so much credit. And I know you get a lot of grief from people, but these are unpaid positions, being party chairman and stuff, whether it's at the county level or the state level. And you've got to keep a very diverse group of people together to try and win elections. And that's not as easy as it used to be for Republicans in Lake County or in Illinois. And that's something I think we want to talk to you about a little bit about is, I went back and looked through some election history, and the last presidential candidate to win Lake County was George W. Bush in 2004. He barely won it. And, the last statewide candidate to win Lake County was Leslie Munger, who's from Lake County, in 2016. And in just less than 10 years, I believe, Lake County government has gone from almost all Republican to almost all Democrats.
Even in a shorter time period than that, it took about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, really. 2018. It was 2016 or 2018. Really,
2016 began.
2016. It really switched. Yeah, it's been
and it kind of mirrors the state. I think if you look back, if you go back to the year 2016. Illinois had
what happened that year that was different?
Well, let me get to that. Illinois had a Republican governor, a Republican comptroller, Leslie Munger, a majority Republican congressional delegation. The majority of congressmen from Illinois were Republicans in 2016, including Bob Dole, who represented Lake Forest. I believe Peter Roskam's district also included parts of Lake County. And if I'm not mistaken, so did Randy Hultgren. I could be wrong on that one. But
both of them had a smidge.
Yeah. So point being is something did happen in 2016. And I don't want to put you on the spot because I know you've got to represent all Republicans. And, if the primary were held today, Donald Trump would be the Republican presidential nominee. So, but clearly there has been, and I think this predates Donald Trump. I mean, we kind of saw this under George W. Bush. We even saw it back, in the 90s when, the first Bush and Bob Dole were the nominees, that the National Party has moved more to the right over the years, particularly on social issues. And the types of Republicans that have won both in Illinois and in Lake County, are more fiscal conservatives, but social moderates. Mark Kirk, Bob Dole, Judy Barr Topinka at the state level, Jim Edgar, Leslie Munger. Jim Edgar won every county in the state, including Cook County, when he was reelected in 1994. I can't imagine that happening today. So, Keith, what's your take on what's happened and how the Republican Party can regain its foothold?
So that is a huge question. So I'll try to take sort of some big topics. We can drill down as much as you have the stomach for. And by the way, I never mind being put on the spot. The biggest advantage I have working for $0 in payment with all of my free time is that I think my family and other people in my life would love for me to get sick of this and come back to having some free time in my life. So at any point, if it's just not working, I'll go back to being a regular citizen and happily participating there. But as to your question, I think the slide actually began in the overall kind of the culture back with Obama, when you had really rough language being thrown around, but it became very personal and very focused using what was emerging as social media. So Obama was wonderful at social media, but back then with Biden, I mean, you take the most milquetoast Republican, Mitt Romney, and there was some really, really unfair, rough language by anyone's account, thrown by Biden, put you all back in chains. Some really awful stuff getting thrown around, but it was exacerbated by social media, where you could run sort of in a very tribal fashion. You could run to the corner that you most agreed with, and it began to become amplified. And now we sort of move forward, drawing the distinction to what happened now. I don't think Trump, while an enormous factor in any purple suburb across the nation, those purple suburbs tended to get blue under Trump. But I think he was sort of an end result. I'm not convinced he was literally the cause. I think he was what emerged as a result of everyone already having moved to try to find their champions and yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs, and people deciding a long time ago that there was no middle ground. For example, it happened to the Democratic Party. I don't believe there are any pro-life Democrats left in Congress. There used to be. There are none, as far as I know. I mean, there might be, but there certainly are none.
What about Manchin in West Virginia? I don't even know if he's pro-life.
I don't know, but he might be an outlier. He might be.
He'd be the only one.
He's definitely an outlier on other things, that's for sure.
Right, but I think both parties sort of ran to their corners, and it's always been that a loud, very small minority in both parties sort of eclipsed the middle very much on a lot of issues, and I think the suburbs sort of fell prey to a lot of that stuff. Look, Lake County, the third biggest county in Illinois, is an enormous place, and even the Republican Party has incredibly diverse views. In Highland Park and Deerfield, you're talking about a congressman like Porter or Kirk or Dole, who tend to be more moderate socially, but very fiscally conservative. And then you talk about the west part of the county, more near McHenry, like in Antioch and Grant Townships and others, that tend to be even socially very much more conservative. And the Republican Party in Lake County used to have very famous internal battles on who is more platform conservative Republican, but we used to win despite our fight internally. And then we began to lose. And about 8 years ago or so, our county board went from super majority Republican to now we're super majority minority. And we had lost all of our congressional seats. We were 7-1 county-wide seats. Now we're 0-7, all in a period of about 6 years. And I really don't think that was so much the fault of the party as it was the general electorate flipped, and the Republican Party was just not ready to accommodate those changes, because it has always won despite itself.
And I understand what you're saying, and certainly there are some longer term demographic changes that have played a major role here, no question about it. But 2020, Donald Trump gets 36% of the vote. He was an anchor that pulls down the rest of the Republican Party in Lake County in a way that is just impossible for anybody to overcome. Mike Neerheim, who was a 2-term state's attorney, very popular guy, perfectly reasonable guy, doing a good job, running for his 3rd term, he got 48%. He was unable, and the rest of the candidates, the countywide candidates for clerk, for recorder of deeds, for circuit court clerk, all went down to defeat, and really were not even close, even though many of these were very good candidates. My God, Carla Wyckoff was our county clerk, was doing a great job as the county clerk. there was no reason in the world for anybody to vote against Carla Wyckoff for re-election, and yet she lost. And I don't think this is just demographic changes. This is a political change, an ideological change on the part of the Republican Party, that the Republican Party has become, well, just enamored with this guy, Donald Trump, to the point where you can't get a word in edgewise outside of that.
Yeah, well, I think it's twofold. And I think, look, in the Donald Trump's reelection, the Republicans almost flipped in that election. They almost flipped the House. And it wasn't because people weren't running on the same politics as Trump. They were running on the same issues. But you had several areas where in the same congressional districts, the people running for Congress would win running on those issues, and Trump would lose running the same issues. And I think his brand of politics is, whether you like it or not, tends to be polarizing. If you agree with Donald, you really agree with Donald. If you don't agree with Donald, then something about him offends you. And there really is no middle ground for him. He's a fantastic marketer. He's tapped into something, especially in populism, that is unavoidable. The people who are left behind by corporations, by governments, look to him as a champion. And I can see where they would find a champion in him, someone who really wants to fight and says, to heck with the people who are in charge. We're going to do it our way and get back. And look, I understand it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do understand it. And at the same time, you're talking about certain election issues that the Democrats have masterfully capitalized on. So, for example, this last election cycle, abortion. Abortion, no matter who was elected in Illinois, abortion was never on the ballot in Illinois. We're never going to change our laws in Illinois. Illinois, if anything, is going to keep doubling down to make it easier to have abortions in Illinois. Didn't matter if we elected the governor. There's a supermajority in the legislature. They would just override the veto. It didn't matter. But the Democrats used the fear of that to capitalize. Justice Burke, as Rick undoubtedly is aware, Justice Burke, a sitting Supreme Court justice, who by the ethics of the Judicial Inquiry Board, hasn't had an opinion publicly on abortion like every judge for probably decades since he's been on the bench. They're not allowed to have those opinions. And I saw commercials that said, pro-life supporters support Justice Burke. Do we really need this pro-lifer on the bench? Stoking fear. And it was politically masterful. It was disingenuous, but it worked. And I think that, Rick, that combination of we're not comfortable as suburbanites with the language that Trump is putting out there, along with the fear that the Democrat Party stoked, was a really rough combination for Republicans.
I will tell you, I think there's a lot of truth in what you say, but on the other hand, part of it is Trump's method and style has been to be as offensive to people who aren't already in his camp as possible. And that has really hurt, I think, with independents. Now we're at the point now where Republicans, 25% of Americans identify as Republicans, 27% identify as Democrats, and the vast majority call themselves independents, I think in large measure because they can't stand either of the two. It used to be for many years in the 60s and the 70s, the Republican and Democratic Party tried to get to the center in order to win the majority, which would be the sensible way in terms of how to win the majority. You want to get those independents. Now, Trump in particular wants nothing to do with independents, wants nothing to do with people who are not already believers in parts of his base. And the result has been very bad for the Republican Party nationwide over the course of the last 6 years, and particularly bad here in Lake County.
It's definitely been a masterclass in politics, but I think you're right. Trump sort of runs on my team or you're on the other side. There's no middle ground. You're either part of Team Trump or you're not. But he's not the only one. Keep in mind, look, you look at the Democrat side, Bernie Sanders, an avowed socialist for 40 years. And suddenly he emerged, and he didn't change anything to run to the middle. It was Team Bernie. You were with Bernie or you weren't with Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
And to be quite honest, if the Democrats hadn't finagled their own primary, I'm not convinced he wouldn't have won or shouldn't have won that primary against Hillary. The Clintons have always been masters at politics, certainly structural and literal. But look, Bernie had a movement. Trump is a movement. And you're sort of on board with the movement or you're not on board with the movement. Yeah. I know plenty of people in Lake County who can honestly say that they believe in the policies and issues that Trump espouses. I'm certainly one of them.
Yeah, I am as well.
I have to admit.
Yeah, I mean, when he talks about things like tax cuts, I mean, Ronald Reagan was the champion of tax cuts.
Yeah,
and we all love Ronald Reagan.
Hey, having a border. I mean, having some stability.
Yeah, and I think he did. The thing with some of the stuff with China. I think that the Chinese government, unfortunately, I think he said some things in a way that may have come across to some people as being anti-Asian. But the truth is, the Chinese government is horribly oppressive and is threatening the world right now. And actually, the people hurt most by the Chinese government are the citizens of China, who really, are really oppressed. But and it frustrated me that we saw presidents from both parties, quite frankly, kissing up to China over the years when we really probably should have gotten tough with them. But it is, bringing this back to Lake Forest and the Lake Forest podcast, because this, you can find national political discussions everywhere. Yes. As much as I've seen, the Republican Party losing lately here in the area, there is some signs that, I'd like to point out, and maybe we can talk about for the upcoming election. In 2020, the same day Donald Trump lost big time, the J.B. Pritzker, Mike Madigan tax hike referendum that was on the ballot lost statewide by, I think, 10 points. It got clobbered in Lake Forest and in Lake County. Using the Lake Forest mayoral election, you talked about Mike Neerheim a minute ago, Rick, and how he barely lost. Yeah. One of the things I think that brought down Prue Beidler's candidacy was when it came out that she was literally the only resident of Lake Forest that had given money to Kim Foxx. It came out that her daughter-in-law had worked for Kim Foxx. She also gave money to Eric Rinehart as well. So, and $1 million to Democrats in general. But I think those two things, so my point, taxes and crime, I think, are two very, very big issues going in. And particularly, next year, there's no statewide election in Illinois next year, which I believe is the first time since 2000 that's worked out. There's no governor election, no U.S. Senate election. Now, obviously, the presidential election's on the ballot, but let's be honest with ourselves. Illinois is not a swing state. If a Republican has a chance of winning Illinois, it's because he or she is winning 40 other states. So, presidential election. Yeah. But, presidential, I think the last Republican to win Illinois was Bush Sr. in 1988 against Michael Dukakis. But
very worthwhile is Eric Rinehart. Eric Rinehart is running for re-election in Lake County. He is the Lake County State's attorney, for anybody who does not know. He has been a advocate for the new Safety Reform Bail Act and a variety of, frankly, what many of us view as soft on crime positions. Keith, this should be one position that the Republicans should have a good shot to win in Lake County.
Eric is vulnerable, but the politics of Lake County, look, Lake County's turned into a blue county. There's a reality. And by the time people get down ballot to a countywide office, yes, the political junkies in all of us see every office as important as the rest. And like, as Rick knows, the judges are last. Sometimes they're the most important races.
Yes.
So sadly, by the time people get down to countywide, a lot of times they vote party bias, and the results are pretty consistent between the offices. But Eric is vulnerable. He was one of two state's attorneys who supported the Safety Act, the enactment of this no cash bail Kim Foxx was the other one out of Cook County. She decided wisely,
Yeah.
despite the fact that a Democrat could get elected with nothing more than a name and a ballot, it must have been really rough because she decided not to run again. But Eric is going to run again. And he's decided to double down on the politics. He loves the Safety Act. The Illinois Supreme Court just upheld elements of the Safety Act, the stuff that would have been crucial, the no cash bail portions of it, based on a very flexible reading of the Illinois Constitution, and somehow Democrats deferring to the power of the legislature for once ever. But that being said, he also has doubled down in his announcement and said he made it political. Like his reelection announcement, he said he's going to make sure, for example, that, and I'm paraphrasing, that he's not going to work with other states' attorneys who have various political beliefs, and we're not quite sure with abortion or whatever else, that he's just not going to work with those offices. He's taken this political thing to a whole new level. Mike Nierheim and others before him, didn't matter what party you were from, when you were elected after running under the banner of Republican or Democrat, you did your job as a state's attorney. You kept the politics out and you did your job. Eric is literally doubling down on the political aspects of it, and it's quite frankly, it's disgusting. I was circuit court clerk. Didn't matter who came into my office for any reason at all, or whether Congressman Dold during my tenure called, or Congressman Schneider, who was a Democrat who ended up succeeding him, called, or anyone else. You did your job as circuit court clerk, and that's what we expect of our countywide officials. And Eric is he's the only one left. And I think the way he wins this is that all of the super progressives come into his aid. The Soros money starts coming in. He's the only one left in Illinois. Even the Will County Democrat state attorney was spearheading getting rid of the Safety Act. And literally he's the only one left. But look, it's not going to be easy, but he's definitely vulnerable.
Are we going to have a primary fight in the Republican Party to run against him?
I don't know. So I'm taking a little bit of a different tack. While I'm not encouraging primary fights, I'm not telling people not to run. If there are known primary fights, the party will not be endorsing. We're going to treat everyone equally. We're going to let the voters of whatever district decide who they want to carry their banner, and we'll support that person. I'm not going to supplant my own perspective for all 700,000+ people in Lake County. You're going to have ultimately 300,000 people voting, or a lot more, close to 400,000 in this election in the general. I want the banner carrier to represent the Republican Party as the people who voted, not just me or the board. So I don't know of a primary right now, but if we have one, I'm going to sit down with all of them and try to do my best to encourage them not to keep it away from being personal, stick to issues. Remember to keep your eye on the prize, support them as a party with resources equally as best we can. And whoever wins, take them over the finish line.
May I ask some questions?
Of course,
so nicely.
Your power's on. We better take advantage of it.
I am the Donald Trump of Lake Forest. Just ask anybody that's transparent in town. What percentage of the people do you think actually know what we're talking about that are listening to this podcast?
Not knowing your audience, I can't be certain, but I will tell you.
Just say no in general. You just go stand out on the street.
I think in the man on the street kind of a thing. I think like maybe 1 in 10 have some inkling of the look. This is like anything. When you dig into films, I watch a film and I see stuff blow up and I laugh and I have a good time with the film. And then there are film buffs who talk about captioning and stage and lighting. And I'm like, what in the world? That's where we are. Again,
it's marketing. You have to break up a routine. You have to get people to pay attention. And in a democratic state, first of all, on the totem pole of knowing what's going on in politics in town, I am at the very bottom. I'm at knee level. But here's what I think is going on, just a guy on the street. You're in a democratic state, and the people that hold jobs, state jobs, they're Democrats. They have a vested interest to keep their jobs, so they're very passionate about getting the votes in, right? There's two reasons why people don't buy. They don't understand the offer, or they're not sufficiently disturbed. On the Republican side, you can be passionate, but going out in a thunderstorm to do a vote for your passion, you're not going to go out as much as you're going to do to cover your job. How do we correct that situation? People not understanding the offer. I've gone to a couple of these Republican events, and no offense to anybody, I'm a Republican as anybody, I think, but you have blowhards yelling at blowhards. Okay, there's almost like you need another term for a Republican. Call it something else. Another term for a Democrat. Wherever you are in the political stakes is your identity, and there is no either or. It's very hard to get people to see both sides. How do we educate people? Of 1 in 10, okay, know what we're talking about. Anything above 1 in 10 is good. How do we market the information out there? Because I'm scratching my head. We did a show during all this Prue Beidler and the mayor thing back on St. Patrick's Day. I was in Florida. I'm reading the DeSantis book. I'm going through Florida and flags everywhere. Everything's great. And DeSantis can't come close to Trump. And if you don't go with Trump, then we're fragmented in a state where the Democrats hold the jobs that can go out there and recruit other voters. That's how the guy in the street sees it. How can we peel away at that thing to make some inroads of this? I'll hang up and listen for my answer.
Well, thanks for the question, Pete. No, it's, you speak a lot of truth to it. You have to capture people's imaginations and their attention in 1 or 2 lines, and you've got to give them something that is meaningful to them. Talking about trade policy and other kinds of stuff, and the latest Supreme Court case on standing and voting rights in Alabama, in Illinois, people hear their eyes just glaze over and whatever. I don't care. This is not meaningful in my life. And in the suburbs in particular, what really captured people's imaginations were the outrage they felt when Trump came on and was very polarizing one way or another in the suburbs, and that was clear from all 6 of the collar counties up here. And also there was a fear aspect. Look, in talking with my wife and in others, they were overly concerned with abortion rights and it being taken away, without even understanding that there was no chance in Illinois of those rights being taken away. So the fear of that captured their imagination, and they wanted to make sure that they handled it. That became a top of the line issue for them. It, as was referenced before with the tax issue that was defeated on the ballot a few years back. That was really heavily marketed, and people really understood how it was going to affect their bottom line and their family finances. So they were able to understand that and internalize it, and it turned into votes one way or another, actually, to defeat it. It's a tough question, Pete, and messaging is a big part of it. It also is how often you're seeing the messaging. You can walk around Lake Forest and ask people their opinions of certain economic issues or other things. I'm guessing 75% of people's opinions are going to be from what them and their friends talk about and what they hear in social media and see on TV and other things. And they're just going to reflect that because people don't have time to dig into the literature, read the Wall Street Journal and everything else. They don't listen to C-SPAN debates. Who has time or wants to do that besides us? So,
well, the issue is they want to see Trump lose more than they want to see a Republican win, right? So
yeah.
And DeSantis he can't hold a candle to him. Why is that?
Yeah, he can't get started. I mean, it's no traction.
Well, what people are finding out is that DeSantis nearly lost 2 cycles ago against, I think the guy's name was Gilliam. He almost lost. It was a very, very close election for governor. On his reelection, he overwhelmingly won. But I think a lot of that is due to the fact that his policies during COVID and his actions regarding COVID were very successful. So he had a lot of Democrats voting for him. There's nothing that will get you votes more than demonstrable success. Then people don't care about your policies. Just keep doing what you're doing. I don't care what you say or think. Just do it. But I don't know that a lot of people really know DeSantis. I personally don't know him. I've heard him in some speeches. Donald Trump
good book. Read the book. It's a good book. He's a good guy, but still. So then you see Trump and you got to, you deal with the mean tweets, and the soccer moms don't like that. And they hate him. And then you get another round of the Obamas.
And they hate him, and he pokes at them.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. But you know what?
People like that. Yeah.
His polls go up every time he gets indicted.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Now that is a fascinating thing, because I don't know that would have happened if the New York prosecution indictment hadn't happened, because even Democrat lawyers across the country looked at the New York thing and said, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
This is just silly," which sort of fed into, there's nothing worse than a conspiracy theorist who's right once. Because once they're right once, then everything's on the table. And when Donald said, "This is a garbage prosecution," and everyone said, "Oh, it was a garbage prosecution."
Yeah.
Now he has an argument. And so, look, Donald is, I think, in a lot of ways, his manner of being is a little bit no different than a lot of, and I don't mean this in a comedic way, but comedians who say tough things and we all laugh and we follow that. We want to like what they're saying. We keep going with the comedians and we enjoy the show, even if some of the things they're saying are sometimes a little bit rough and edgy, as comedians should be, speaking the truth on that very edge. Once people are into Donald and they sort of are with that and they're flowing in that ocean and they're flowing in that momentum, you sort of start liking the snipes he's taken and the poke the bear, and you chuckle along with him and you find out you're really having a pretty good time with Trump, and then you're in. And he has been able to do this his entire career.
Yeah.
He has that masterful marketing kind of Circus Barker kind of draw you in way, and he injects things with humor, and it's not hard to see why people get sucked into his rhetoric.
Even when he wins, the party loses. I mean, that's my take.
Yeah, that's.
I wish
he has done nothing to build the Republican Party, and I'm not saying he doesn't want the Republican Party.
2016 was Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. Now, now
we got the House back.
Just barely. The House got the House barely back.
Barely.
Yeah.
Donald
tends to be a bad result.
Okay, that's federal. Can we get back to
Can we Pete, do you mind if we go back to Lake County?
Oh, yeah.
I would like to talk for a minute, if I could, or ask Keith about his counterpart as the Democratic Lake County chairman for many years, fellow State Senator Terry Link, who had, by the way, I realize that Joe and Pete may not know him very well because
I know who he is.
He's been less, but Terry Link.
I know all about Terry Link.
He was
Prue Beidler gave him money, by the way.
Yeah, he was very much part of politics in Lake Forest for many years. He's had a major local role here. He was really, in many ways, the guy who was riding the horse that got the Democrats from complete nowhere to complete dominance in Lake County. And now he has been, I believe, indicted for tax fraud and is looking at, he has resigned, I think, as state senator.
Yes. He's long gone from that.
This is, the rise and fall of Terry Link is a local story.
He testified in the Madigan ComEd trial.
Yeah, so Terry Link was since 1996, I think, he was in that Senate spot. He was there for a very, very, very long time. And this is back when Democrats really couldn't win very much in Lake County. It's sort of the reverse right now of the situation we find ourselves. And he also had a counterpart, Lauren Beth Gash, who was a state rep at one point and ran against Mark Kirk for various things, sort of very old school politics. I don't know that Lake County's success I would necessarily put at the foot of Terry Link as much as I think I'd put it more at the foot of Lauren Beth Gash, who ultimately is turned into the Lake County chair, Democrat chair now. She started the 10th congressional organization in opposite of
the 10th Dems.
Lake County, in Lake County organization, and started just really doing the best guerrilla marketing with networking, electronics, and newsletters, and she has kept it up and her list, and she has been really almost the definition of what you do politically to scratch and claw your way up as a party, and then take advantage of a change in the environment to capitalize on it. She really has been
early voting,
very successful.
They got on top of early voting and vote by mail.
Oh, everything, and their lists are enormous.
Yeah.
Their lists are enormous, but
the Republicans turned up their nose at it. Oh, no, that's not it.
Well, because again, we were winning despite ourselves. We didn't have to do any of that. We got fat and happy in the luxury of winning without a lot of effort because they were Republicans. And when we lost, we couldn't figure out how to deal with things. Whereas they were clawing their way up and started winning, and they just kept the car going. It really, I will tip my hat to Lauren Beth Gash, certainly on that. But it's to Terry Link. So he resigned in about 2020. A number of people had suspected the way he was acting and with the rumors that he was probably mic'd up for something. And of course he was. And the feds had him involved with the Louis Arroyo bribery issue, where he was, I believe, mic'd up. And he's pled guilty to, now Terry Link, to those tax charges, and he's due to be sentenced shortly. But he was mic'd up in exchange for, I think, some leniency on his own case. And of course, we've seen what happened to Arroyo on the bribery. But Terry hasn't been around since 2020. And then shortly thereafter, I believe, resigned his chair spot with the Democratic Party. So
why can't the Lake County Republicans make better hay out of the level of corruption that the Democratic Party incessantly spews out, including Link? I mean,
Mike Madigan.
Why is this not a number one thing that we're talking about? It's
extraordinary. You know what? It's amazing. The Democrats are able to, as a party message, every hardcore Democrat carries the water when a Republican stumbles on a crack in the sidewalk.
Yeah.
But for a decade or more, we've been running against Madigan as a party, and it never worked. Yeah. And I don't believe it ever worked because Republicans at their essence don't get energized by people they can't vote for or against. And unless you were in Mike Madigan's little world in his district, or you were in the legislature, no other Republican in the state gets to vote for or against Mike Madigan. So it was like a mythological figure that Republicans were never able to internalize. We have Alderman Burke. Then we have a whole slew of Rod Blagojevich.
The list of Democratic state senators, state reps, Chicago aldermen, various suburban officials who have been convicted and are in jail is a huge list. And yet I never see the Republican Party campaigning on this issue.
Well,
other than Mike Madigan. Yeah.
We tried with Madigan for years and years. Yeah. I think it is where I'm at now without any scientific evidence. So I'm giving you an absolute political guess.
You're on the right show.
Is twofold. The first is that Republicans in general tend to vote on they find themselves to be a little bit more principled in their vote. So even Republicans will vote for certain candidates, and they will sit out voting against Republican candidates, despite the fact that they know by doing so the Democrat will win, in order to keep their principles solid and their morality sound to themselves. Republicans will sit things out. On the other side of the coin, Democrats stand for not Republican. So if there's a Republican in the ballot, Democrats will get together and vote for the Democrat and against the Republican, because God forbid the Republican wins. That's all that matters to a chunk of the Democratic Party. We don't operate like that. So that's why Madigan
can I give an example, guys? And you guys are going to get really pissed, but I'm going to do it. Congress, okay, Schneider, and then you had Severino. You guys all don't like Severino. Why can't we get on the same page with who we want to run up against Schneider? And what did Severino do wrong that everybody's so pissed at him?
You want me to save you and answer it for you, Keith?
Look, I'm as chairman, you certainly can chime in, but look,
he's been on the show twice, never done anything wrong to me, so I got no beef. I push. So I'm looking for somebody to change my mind.
Yeah, Joe's colorful. He has.
You give me Pete speak, Joe. Here, you say colorful. You give the political speak, and Joe, you give me Pete.
Joe Severino is colorful. I'm bland and boring.
So he sort of rebuked the more traditional way of campaigning, and he does a little bit more on social media and others. And he's taken on a little mantle of Trump. He's not afraid to insult other Republicans and try to call them out,
including you.
Yep, including me. I have been the target
and Dan
of
Rogers
Joe, and Dan
Yep.
Rogers and Richard Porter and others. So I join a fine crowd. That being said,
Probably me now.
Joe has said he's running in the primary, and look, I wish him luck. He underperformed in the last election cycle, even versus the district. So I hope he can find a way to get his views a little more clearly relayed to the voters, so they can,
Which
really
Republican
take a look at his
overperformed?
candidacy. What's that?
What Republican overperformed?
Well, it wasn't so much that any overperformed. A couple of did, but he significantly underperformed. Like, I think he lost by about 30 points in a plus 14 district.
Who would have done better?
Well,
Bob
Bob Dole,
Dole?
I think, would have done better.
We both immediately had an answer.
Yeah, I think there are lots of people, but that being said, there's so many what ifs in who would have done better. You never know. I mean, Schneider ran on being absolutely harmless and vanilla. And I think that was some of his campaign commercials of the I'm not a part of the
riding his
circus.
bicycle.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not a part of the circus. If you want stability, Mr. and Miss Suburban, vote for me.
Boring
And that
government.
might,
I've heard that one.
yeah, and that
Well,
might,
and look, I'm no fan of Brad Schneider, but he has, when you compare him to like Jan Schakowsky or the Squad, AOC and that crowd that hates Israel.
Yeah.
Schneider don't look so bad compared to that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's still
very
terrible.
moderate. Yeah.
look, and
But
by the way,
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't.
I'm throwing out Severino because look,
Yeah.
us Facebook old guys, Republicans, just see the sniping going back and forth, and I'm like, well, what if he's underperforming? He's the tallest midget, and he went out there. Why can't there be somebody better to put out there? I
No,
don't
that's a
get
good
it.
question. The reason is because
well, I think there is
it's a
someone
suicide
running
mission.
from Lake Forest that's
Yeah,
going to run in the primary against him, but that'll be another show, I guess.
That's secret.
Well, I always wait for candidates to announce themselves. I don't want to get ahead of anything.
We'll
but
wait.
so
Yeah.
I've heard that there's potentially other people in this primary, but look, at the end of the day, it's a tough race. You're going to have to raise a lot of money to be competitive in a plus 14 or so district where the current congressman doesn't do anything to cause problems. And when you avoid the spotlight and you have all the name recognition and you have a little bit of a war chest, and you can campaign as the most vanilla guy, the calming factor in a circus of a national election, that's not a bad recipe for getting reelected in this kind of a district. So my hat's off to him. I think he's running the right way. And I hope that if Joe runs, of course, no one's filed anything, but if Joe runs, that he retools his message or whatever he needs to do, because I'd like to beat Brad. I don't think Brad's a bad person. I just don't agree philosophically with what he does for the most part, but I would love to see a Republican in that seat. What's that?
Spends our money. Sorry. I'll edit
Yeah,
that out.
although
He's horrible on fiscal issues. Horrible.
Yeah,
Horrible on fiscal issues.
although under Trump, I think there's plenty of blame to go around to some of the Republicans who felt it necessary to run up the deficit on just about everything too.
Yeah,
you could say that about Bush too. I mean,
yeah, there are once people go to DC, somehow they forgot some of their pledges, and I think that's
and part of that that Paul Ryan tax increase deal with Obama kind of led to Trump, because a lot of the base was very upset with Paul Ryan and some of the establishment Republicans. Though my definition of an establishment Republican is it's a Republican who's won. But they were very upset, and I was upset with the compromise they made after the 2014 election with Obama that increased federal taxes.
Well, and I think some of the stuff where people go to DC and then their values are compromised and they vote for these mixed bills, that led again to the rise of someone like Trump, who didn't have to listen to those politicians, who could come in and say, I'm going to do this. And darn it, he tried to do it. And literally the Republican Party, I mean, how many times does your own party set up an anti-you in their wing to try to block you and blend in with everybody else in DC? And that's exactly what happened. So people see him as a fighter who keeps to his word. And I think that's missing in politics now.
Politics only matter when it affects you. And we're trying to get granular here on the local level to get people to care, because as Joe says, the federal election doesn't mean anything to us, but the local ones do. We have a caucus picking all of our people. So quote unquote politics don't come into play here. How can we get people involved to make a difference in the Republican Party?
Here's what we're doing, because I don't know the answer to that. Politics essentially is you're asking people to volunteer their precious time and their treasure to do something that may not result in a win for them, not an investment that necessarily will yield any fruit. And in Illinois, especially, we're not even border up here. We're bright blue, so it's a little bit rough. We are rebranding the Republican Party. Now, we haven't talked about this. I guess I'm not going to let the cat fully out of the bag, but you are all some of the first to know that in the next few months, we decided that we had to give the Republican Party a sense of meaning that wasn't defined by the Democrats or the media or the Democrats. So they're the people who define who the Republican Party is. And we are always on our heels trying to explain why we are not homophobes, why we don't hate women, and all these other horrible things. And once you start explaining things, you've lost. So we are going to go back to rebranding us, back to our core principles. Individual as primacy over the government, of the nature of community and the importance of safety, and of trust in your government in a way that it does things that it has to do, and it doesn't get involved in people's lives. And it lets people be involved in their own kids' lives, in school, and the importance of family and that level of individual existence and freedom in the US. We've forgotten about that. We don't talk enough about that. And we think that if we start with that rebranding, that people will remember why it's important that the philosophy of the Republican Party be supported. And once we have their attention there, then hopefully we can introduce them some good candidates that aren't taken from like the homeless shelter, we don't find out right before the election that they have 54 children by 43 different people. And I mean, I think we might be the only 4 people in America who aren't Herschel Walker's kids.
Yeah.
How is it that right before the election they're figuring this out? So we need to do better in our candidates. We need to make sure that they understand the slings and arrows that are going to come at them, and that they message their issues in a way that relates to people understanding and not too high of a level, not over people's heads. And we give people a real choice. There's some data that Core Strategies actually is a consulting group, but they put together some macro data on Illinois and found out some interesting things. They really wanted to understand the nature of the body politic in Illinois. Is it worthwhile to stick around in Illinois? Can Republicans win? And what they discovered was, of the 3 groups, the conservative, progressive, or the middle, the independent, where do people, regardless of how they vote, where did they identify themselves? And the first biggest group, as you can imagine, were the independents. But the second biggest group was actually the conservatives. And why they followed up with, okay, well, depending on why you voted your way, why did you vote for the other party if you voted that way?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I didn't like the candidates, so I sort of went, I'll just vote for the status quo. That means it's on us. The message is correct. People want government to set the rules, keep everything fair, and get out of the way. Do what they got to do and be done. We have to get good candidates who understand this and can relate to people.
Keith, how can the Republicans piggyback off of the Bud Light debacle by just saying we're not woke? Or is that too Trump-ish?
No, it's not too Trump-ish. Here, I don't think we take necessarily that. Here's what we stress. We stress that we believe that parents have a right to be involved in their kids' lives, that Title IX and women's sports were created for a reason. I've got 2 daughters. If someone in one of my daughter's high school classes, some big football player who plays with my brother on the high school team, suddenly decides that they feel like they're going through issues and that they would like to identify as a woman, and suddenly went against my daughter on the volleyball team, I've seen videos of how awful this turns out. That's not fair. That's not. I mean, scientifically, it's not fair. Politically, it's not fair. And it guts the whole idea of having separate sports, for example. But I think people relate to that. When you encompass things in words like woke and other things, people have their own ideas of what that means. I think we have to get down to specific examples. I want parents involved in their kids' lives on school boards. The school boards work for the parents and the voters of the district, not for themselves. Get the parents involved. People get that.
Okay, what's anti-woke? It's thinking for yourself. Don't let they dictate what you do. That's all. Independent thinking. It's not that hard to market. Bud Light is just getting crushed from that.
Yes. Well, Bud Light forgot who its audience was. You can
Republicans.
It's more than
beer
that,
drinkers.
Beer drinkers. People who,
and they also forgot that they have the worst product out there. I mean,
yes.
it is.
What took the place? What took the place of Bud Light as top? Modelo.
Rick and Joe.
Modelo, which is owned by Anheuser-Busch.
Yes.
But it's owned by Anheuser-Busch, the same company.
Bud Light forgot that there are substitutes available for the product. If there are no substitutes available for your product, you have a certain amount of power in the marketplace that is not interchangeable. If it is interchangeable, then you have to be very careful of who your market is, because if you piss them off, they're going to go somewhere else. I mean, it's basic economic theory. And Bud Light marketing they tried to keep it under the radar. They tried to keep it quiet, but they forgot who their market was. And then their market said, you know what? I don't stand for this. I'm going to go to the shelf right over there and buy this roughly the same kind of beer at the same price. And I'm not going back.
Do you think the culture wars, I understand from a marketing standpoint, a product like Bud Light, or now you're seeing this stuff with the Jason Aldean song and everything.
Yep.
And that gives us all feel goods and likes on social media amongst our conservative friends and stuff. But, getting back to winning elections, does the culture wars thing really get us to 51% of the vote? Because I think part of DeSantis's struggles right now are a lot of people are saying, I don't know if he'd do any better in a general election than Trump if he's going to waste his time taking on Disney, which is the largest tourism source of revenue for the state of Florida. I think the bread and butter for the GOP, and the thing that virtually every Republican can agree on, taxes and crime, and it also is the two issues that I think appeals to the most swing voters. Which, by the way, the Jason Aldean song is about crime, basically. So I think that's actually a good example of where people don't like seeing people robbing.
I've got to listen to this song
stores, or giving the finger to cops and stuff like that. I mean, that's just unacceptable. Like, getting back to the Lake Forest mayoral election. I mean, I think, the support of Kim Foxx by someone in Lake Forest was proved to be politically fatal.
In order to be good at marketing, you have to be able to say
we played a role
in a couple sentences. And I don't see any Republicans being able to concise it down to 2 seconds because you guys blab so damn much.
Well, you know what? So Pete, yes, that's messaging. If it takes more than 2 sentences, you lose. People's eyes glaze over. They just don't care. But it's the culture wars, Joe. I think that is a winner in a lot of ways. Crime is seriously important to people, good. Yeah. Because that is a matter that, my kids, I've got a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. Well, when we were 19, we might be going downtown in downtown Chicago in a group.
Yeah, I did.
There's a lot of trepidation now on that kind of stuff, whether it's real or just perceived. There is that trepidation, and crime is a big impact. Crime is big. Now, if to support the blue, you're getting very local. In the city of Chicago, which is not Lake Forest, Lake Foresters will see, well, we support our blue. We're okay. Now in Chicago, they might not. That's somewhere else. Highland Park does the same thing. So it's not necessarily local impact. Now, if it were on the ballot in Lake Forest, that would have a local impact. So the culture issues, when you tell someone, I want you to be involved in your kids' education and what they learn, that is meaningful to them. If you say to people, I want you to have control over your life. Taxes, it's important because it comes right out of your wallet. Crime is awful. We got to deal with it in certain ways. This is making it worse and worse. People can envision how that might impact them. So it's important. If we take the culture issue and break it down to how it relates to the individual, then we find a way to connect with people. And that is
how much do you think
what's
the
in it for me
likability of the candidate matters? I mean, like we had on our favorite, the podcast's favorite Democrat, Holly Kim. Holly is just a really likable person. And she's going to be on. Is she on the ballot this time? I think she is, isn't she?
No. She just won re-election.
Not her year. Yeah.
No, she just won. So good. Holly from, I believe she's from Mundelein. She was a trustee. Holly is a very good campaigner. She is everywhere. And somehow,
Lost mayor
look
by
at-
how many votes?
yeah, well, it's largely an
5.
administrative office. And so people sort of ignore the job the treasurer does. I don't think David Stolman, when she beat David Stolman, it wasn't because people thought he was doing a garbage job. He was
No.
doing a good job.
No,
Um,
it was fine.
I'm not even sure people really know, in essence, except dealing with money, what the treasurer's job really is, or any of the countywides. It's only when they screw up. Now, Holly's got some issues that she has dealt with. So
Mhm.
she's had she double billed for property taxes a number of years ago, and a lot of these things get glossed over.
Yeah, she
because-
missed the payment, missed the bond
Yeah.
payment.
That's right. So, and that's a big thing. That's a
But
huge
but
thing.
the
for Lake
voters
County.
forgave that because she's charming.
Well, not only the voters forgave it, but the papers didn't really go into it. So look, we're in if it was a Republican slanted county, she would have gotten hammered. But she is a very good campaigner. She is very likable. I've met her several times. I never walked away with a bad experience after having met her. She's a very likable person, and she knows how to campaign.
Well, she came
And
out.
Quite
there are no
frankly, she's
papers.
everywhere.
She worked at one time for Dole.
Yeah, she's everywhere, and she's actually not afraid, which is very interesting. She's not afraid to support a middle of the road Republicans. She's not afraid. She sort of runs her own thing, and so I think she's a combination of someone who could probably stay in that office for a long time as the county state's Democrat if she continues the way she's going. She's going to be very tough to beat.
I bet she runs for a higher office. She's
I wish she'd run against Sandy Hart. I mean, that
Ah.
person's
Uh,
she's got to go. But that's another
Yeah,
show.
I think you're right, Rick. And I think the advantage of being in a 4-year office is that you can run in the
Yes.
interim years and not give up your office. Unlike state rep, which is always on the ballot, you have to give
Right.
up your office to run.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity if you're in a 4 or 6-year office to run for something else without giving it up. And I don't know what she has to lose. She won pretty convincingly, and she's a good campaigner. She's gonna be tough to beat.
He's
But
transparent.
on the crime issue,
Yeah.
there's been stuff here in Lake County. Bring it back to that state's attorney's race, which I think is going to be the marquee race for you guys, for us
I do
next
too.
year, everyone.
I'm very
There is, forget about what's going on in Chicago, as hard as it is to forget. There's stuff happening that's happened here in Lake County. There was a carjacking in Libertyville of a pregnant woman with the toddler in the back, and the
Yep.
toddler got thrown onto the street in Waukegan and almost got run over. Thank God it all worked out, but still it could have turned out a lot worse. And then there was a 4-year-old killed by the mother's boyfriend because she spilled juice on the guy's Xbox or something, and only got like a relatively light sentence for that. I mean, these are things that if Mike Neerheim or whoever hopefully is the Republican nominee for state's attorney would never have allowed, never have seen, because that carjacking, those guys, if you look closely, had gotten nailed for some earlier offenses that should have put them in jail and kept them off the street. I mean, this is serious stuff, and it happened in Libertyville. It certainly could happen in Lake Forest or anywhere in Lake County. These types of things, and Rinehart has not done his job. I call him Kim Foxx Jr. He doesn't have the baggage of the Jussie Smollett stuff like Kim Foxx does, but on policy, he's exactly the same as Kim Foxx.
Yes, and I think the Safety Act is again a double down on this, and you're going to see, I think, just like in New York and in other places that have tried this cashless bail kind of a thing more locally, you're going to see people who, after the fact, people are going to ask after they've committed a crime, and they're going to say, well, this person was out on cashless bail or whatever else after being alleged to have done X, Y, and Z, and people will say, why was that person out on the street? And Eric, again, is the only state attorney left in Illinois who is for this cashless bail system as it's written up in the Safety Act. And he doubled down on it. He's going to have a lot of explaining to do. We are going to make sure that our candidates are aware of the issues, and hopefully they have a message to put forth. But as a party, we're also going to speak out as well. Our job as a party, the success of our party, is whether we can get good candidates elected under the Republican banner.
I'm hearing that Mary Lou Cole may announce for state's attorney on the Republican side.
So she has been one of the names that has been out there. You know, it's I haven't heard if she is the only one, but the rumors tell me that she's all in. So look, I've met her a couple of times. She is very much in the model of the likability of sort of Holly Kim as well. Very, very, very likable, very charming, very, very honest. You can tell she's not trying to BS you, that she's just telling you from her own experience where she believes the office is falling down and where it can go. I'd be very excited if she would run, to be quite honest. I think she would be a new face for the Republican Party.
Yes.
And I'm most excited about that. Win or lose, I want to see faces I don't recognize coming to the party to give us some new life and some new ideas.
Keith, if someone watching this podcast wants to get involved in the Republican Party, says, you know, I really want to help elect Republicans, what should they do?
They can email me. I'm happy to give my cell phone out. I'm happy to give my email out. I'm happy to do whatever it takes. We have a lot of precinct committee. We got to rebuild the infrastructure of the party. I'm greedy enough to take whatever time people believe they have, whether it's an hour a week, an hour a month, or a couple of days. We need to rebuild everything we're doing. Now is the time to rebuild, because the petition season will start probably after Labor Day. And that's when you really are getting into the 2024 election season. And I'm also willing to listen to any ideas people have. No idea to me, as far-fetched as people might think their ideas might be, I'm willing to sit down and listen to every one of them. And I'm happy to incorporate ideas we haven't tried before, because quite frankly, we again are in the position that Lauren Beth Gash and the Democrat Party were in 10 or 15 years ago, where they had to claw their way at the top. The reality is we are not doing well in winning seats. So we have to win these seats back. So I'm willing to listen to some new ideas.
When is the primary? When is the 2024 primary? The Democrats at Springfield have moved the date around so many different times, depending on whatever's good for them. What is it now?
It's back in March, I believe. It's back in March. So we don't have the official packets yet from any of the county clerks. I think the judicial sub-circuits are sort of holding that up as they figure that out. But generally, the petition season will start after Labor Day, and you can circulate to about Thanksgiving, and right after Thanksgiving or so, till about the 1st of December is the filing period, or so, roughly. And then by the middle of December, you'll know who's going to pretty much be on the ballot. We're also looking for some good candidates. I don't care if it's a first-time run for anything. We're going to do what we can to make sure that people receive training on how to be good candidates and have the benefit of some of the institutional knowledge that I think we've lost over the last 6 or 8 years. We're bringing people back in. Bob Churchill, Louis Savet, a number of others who have been in office to success or run political campaigns, who sort of found that maybe they weren't so welcome in the Republican Party. We're welcoming them all back. That's how you win elections. They know how to shake hands in the absence of social media. Before the social media dumpster fire, they know how to talk to voters. And I think we have to learn how to do that. And we're willing to invest the resources in training our candidates on how to do it.
Yeah.
Look, my personal philosophy is I don't even care if someone's a Democrat. If I can sit down with them and convince them to vote for any one of the Republican candidates, it's a good conversation to have. I'm not going to call them out as to why they're a Democrat and other things. It's a start. We miss talking about issues with people and not ascribing some kind of personal animus or deciding that they're just evil because they don't agree with us. It doesn't matter to me what you believe in. Give me an opportunity to try to talk to you, and I'm happy. And then just participate in the process. Great. We'll have more conversations. We'll get you there.
And we say all this, and people just they'll only read the negative headlines.
Yep. Well, those are more fun. Those are way more
We're
fun.
just wired that way. That's how our brains are.
It's clickbait. It's extraordinary clickbait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what's your website, email, phone number, all that stuff, so they can get a hold of you, Keith?
My cell number is 773-315-1380. And they can always get me at kbrin@ameritech.net. And for those under the age of 30, that used to be a company.
I was about to say that's older than AOL.
As I move my AOL coaster over, that's right. That's
CompuServe. Yeah.
And take a look for our rebranding in the next couple of months.
And the township organizations too, get involved in those, right? I mean, like we said earlier, there's 5 townships here, but Shields is the biggest one. And I know Dan Rogers is doing a lot of stuff to re-energize the Shields Township GOP with, I've been to a couple of their meetings and stuff, and our friend Philippe Malin, who's been on this show, is involved in some of that. So that's something to see and hopefully work with as well, right? Maybe we have Dan on a future show.
So that's
Maybe,
one of the things
very active in this next
one of the things we're trying to do is instead of a Lake County organization that dictates sort of policy for everyone at the top, I'm sort of pushing everything over to the local township organization. So because look, I live in Highland Park, but even next door in Lake Forest, I don't know how to get someone elected in Lake Forest as good as, for example, Rick does, or either of you two. So why would I think of that for the rest of the county? So I rely on people like Dan Rogers. And let me give you a shout out to Dan Rogers. I'm glad you brought it up. Dan was taking an organization that was just sort of floating in the ocean, and he has absolutely supercharged the organization. It has a full complement of precinct committeemen. They're working with data. They're actively looking to improve things and to get messages out to voters. And they're actually building their ranks in a way that I think has even surprised Dan. In a lot of ways, I think if you tell people you're still here and what you stand for, there are a lot of Republicans in Lake County who've sort of written off the party as non-existent. That's what I want them to hear with our rebranding and with people like Dan Rogers. We're still here, and here's what we stand for. And Dan is a perfect example of how a township organization has just flourished in less than 6 months. He is back to full bore and is just absolutely killing it and pushing the township forward. So I'm thankful for Dan, and I'm really proud of his work.
You think Dan is a plus for the marketing end of things?
Well, he's a bit of he's a social conservative, let's say that.
Yeah.
But he is, he grew up in Lake Bluff. He went to Lake Forest High School.
Yeah.
He's lived his whole life pretty much in this community. I mean, I think he went to school with Eric Guskarian.
Yeah.
So, he is, he is, if his personal Facebook posts, you can see he's rather socially conservative. But yeah, I mean, but the nuts, I always view these party offices, whether it's your job, Keith, or Dan's job, or Don Tracy's job at the state level, it's really more nuts and bolts than ideology. It's building infrastructure, and whoever gets nominated in that primary can then use that infrastructure, because we all know the Democrats certainly have an infrastructure to their party. It's a well-oiled machine, as Pete said, there's still a lot of patronage out there with those jobs. I can testify to that firsthand at the state level, that there's still a lot of Democratic precinct captains and precinct committeemen out there working for the state of Illinois. And Cook County and I don't know about Lake County, but
patronage is alive and well.
It's alive and well. And if anyone thinks because Madigan is out that changed, you're sadly mistaken.
No.
So, but yeah, thanks. This has been great. Chairman, thank you so much. I think you've shed a lot of light on some stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it very much.
The Lake Forest Podcast is supported by viewers, listeners, and businesses just like you. Looking for the best pool supplies? Look no further than Dohany's Pool Supplies. With a history dating back to 1967, this family-owned business offers everything families need to keep their pools clean and sparkling, from chemicals to equipment. Plus, customers enjoy free shipping on all orders. Visit Dohany's Pool Supplies today at doheny.com, DOHENY.com, to learn more. Forest Bluff Real Estate Team serves Illinois, Wisconsin, Lake Forest, and Lake Bluff. John Josephitis, Laura Lee Van Fleet, and of course, Michelle Parnell. Get a free market analysis now at forestbluffrealestate.com. For the best cannabis in the world, look no further than Iliad Epic Grow. Owned by Lake Bluff's own Rich Ruzich, they are a cannabis cultivation center focusing on hard-to-find small batch products that will delight both the occasional user and ganjier. When visiting Michigan, ask for it by name. Epic Products, exceptional process. For more information, email info@iliadgrow.com. Havey Communications has been helping first responders arrive safely since 1983. It's owned by Lake Forest's own Mike Havey. Check them out at haveycommunications.com. We'd also like to say we're thankful for our Patreon supporters, Costa, Lance, Otto, RDM, John C., and Helen. Shout out to the Lake Forest Breakfast Group, Broad Stop and Captain Mike's in Kenosha, the Greentown Tavern, and the Frolic Lounge in Waukegan.